welcome to Forbidden Planet TV, and on today's episode we are joined in person by Garth Nix.
Hello.
Hello. How's it going?
It's good. It's good to be here.
Yes, good. And you're over for Galance Fest?
I am here for Galance Fest, yes.
Very exciting. So I think I remember we did an interview during lockdown, which wasn't quite as in person.
Yes, the old Zoom or equivalent interview.
Yes,
Never quite as good. It's nice to be here in person.
Yes, definitely. And it's so lovely to see all the books lined up together.
Yes.
So,
Always.
What can you tell us about your newest release with Galance?
Well, Sir Hereward and Mister Fitz is a collection of stories about a knight, artillerist, and his companion, Mr. Fitz. Sir Hereward, the knight, is the only male child of a society of witches who normally have only female children. He's an aberration, but he's still been employed in the family business, as it were, which is to rid this very baroque world of unwanted godlets and gods, inimical ones that cause trouble. So that's his business. He's a godslayer, and Mr. Fitz is a self-willed puppet who has lived for thousands of years and is in fact much more adept in the whole business. He is in fact a sorcerer. He uses an arcane needle to unpick reality or stitch it back together. He also was Sir Hereward's nanny, where he was Mistress Fitz earlier in Sir Hereward's life. So he's always been with Sir Hereward, and in many ways he's in a sort of parental role. And the stories are about the two of them roaming this world of gunpowder and sorcery, and invariably becoming entangled in having to get rid of an inimical godlet, whether that's why they're in a particular place or not. There's always something going on, and of course lots of other things happen as well along the way, particularly for poor Sir Hereward, who doesn't really want to keep doing it, and would quite like to have a normal life, have a successful romance that doesn't end badly, but generally speaking he's not so lucky. So it's a collection of stories. The first one was published about 20 years ago, and it was great to have them all together in one place, plus a brand new one I wrote particularly for this book. And I guess one of the great things about this sword and sorcery, or gunpowder and sorcery duo, is that people like them, and including people like George R.R. Martin, who very kindly said for the book, "I love making the acquaintance of Sir Hereward and Mr. Fitz. If you haven't met them yet, you're in for a treat." So thank you, George. Just take his word for it. You don't need to listen to me.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. He George was over. I think it was the end of last year. It's always obviously
it's a blur.
It's very much. So, and having the blurb from Brandon as well.
Yes,
so.
Brandon's also been a great supporter, and I'm a huge fan of both George and Brandon. So it's always good when there's this mutual respect. I had actually, speaking of Brandon, we were in Dubai together years ago for the Emirates Festival, and we were at one point we were out in the desert for a sort of desert experience with hawking and so on, and I took a photograph of Brandon with a hawk on his hand, which I posted as Brandon with hawk photo by Garth Nix, and he took a photo of me with a hawk, Garth Nix with hawk photo by Brandon Sanderson. Just good fun, Fantasy writers in the desert with hawks. Yeah. You can't go wrong, can you?
Just an average Saturday.
Yeah.
So we were talking a little while ago. We had Jasper Ford on the channel earlier this year, and we were saying about the importance of comedy in fantasy and how there hasn't been as much for a while, and maybe it's kind of an after lockdown effect that we need a bit more kind of camaraderie and a bit more humour, and this definitely has some humour in there. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's always humour in real life. Even in very dire situations, people use use humour to actually help them get through, often terrible situations. And I think, to me, having it in stories, it's partly a sort of tonal thing, what you're trying to achieve, but I think that actually helps make it real, because that's what people do. They make jokes, even about terrible things and when all things are happening. Of course, getting the sort of level of the humour right is the hard part, depending on the kind of book you're wanting to do. Jasper, of course, is an expert at writing, very clever, humorous fantasy. I would say, particularly Sir Hereward and Mister Fitz, there are elements of humour, but it's not humorous fantasy as such.
No.
Yeah, but I think they all. It's like all these components are important, and getting the balance right is the hard part.
Yes, and just the relationship, obviously, between the two main characters is so interesting, because they have each other's backs, but they're very different.
They are very, very different. Yes, and I guess part of it, is that Mr. Fitz has been made for a purpose. He's been made to be a sorcerer, to fight inimical gods. He looks like a little entertaining puppet. Most puppet. That's an interesting thought. Entertaining puppet. Most of the puppets in this world who look like him play music and dance and are lovely, and you see them and you laugh and you think, oh great, they're going to do a song. Mr. Fitz can actually do that, and does sometimes to distract people, but then he might also kill you without a blink of the eye, but only if it's required by what needs to be done. But he is very cold-hearted about what needs to be done. The job is all removing the world, removing an inimical godlet from the world is so much more important to him than anything else. Whereas Sir Hereward is a relatively young man. He's in his 20s. He's had a lot of life experience of combat and struggle and so on, but inside he doesn't, I think, believe that removing the inimical godlet is the most important thing. Why can't we just let it go this time?
Yes.
Can't we just leave, turn a blind eye? And Mr. Fitz doesn't allow that. So there's all that sort of dynamic going on as well, as well as Sir Hereward's unusual place in his family. That's also sort of ongoing issue for him. And Mr. Fitz, was his nanny, is his best friend, is his sort of parent. So there's all of that as well as being his friend. So that also underlies the what I wanted to achieve, which was to write the kind of sword and sorcery duo, very much influenced by Fritz Lieber, Hereward and the Great Mouser, lots of other duos of this kind in fantasy, Elric and Moonglum, and so on. So I guess like many things that I write, it's nearly always written for myself. Yeah. And it's like I want one of that kind of story, and so I end up writing one. And in the case of Sir Hereward and Mister Fitz, I just kept on writing them because sometimes people would ask me for a story for a collection. My classic response to when I'm asked by an editor, "Can you do a story for this collection?" is to say, "No, I'm too busy." I'm sorry, I'm too busy. I'd love to do a story for you, but particularly when it's George R.R. Martin and Carter Dezois, which several of the stories appeared in collections they edited. But regretfully, so I'm sorry. I've got a novel due. I can't do it. But invariably, what happens is I think about it. And 24 hours later, I've begun the story, and I have to email them back and say, well, actually, I am writing one now. I hope you will consider it. It just seems to be. So I would say 80% of the stories in this book were ones where I said, no, I can't. I haven't got time, and then wrote them anyway. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not a bad.
Yeah, I find short fiction in general. I write short fiction often as a sort of antidote to the novel that I'm working on, and quite often it's it's even helpful in retrospect, even when it takes time out from the novel, doing something very different from the main work I'm doing. Sometimes sort of frees me up to continue, or just makes a change, and that's helpful as well. So that's how I justify it to myself. Anyway, I guess the truth is I like writing short fiction as much as I like writing novels, and they just crop up from time to time.
And it's nice as well, kind of, that you're saying obviously these characters have been with you for quite some time.
Yeah.
So they kind of keep coming back. So there is an element of you're rejoining old friends.
Absolutely, and quite often, when it's a themed anthology, say the Book of Swords or Rogues, and I read the pitch and I think, there's a Sir Hereward and Mister Fitz story in this, and it instantly makes me think of these particular characters. So there's that as well. That connection prompts me to come back to them again.
Yes, yeah. Which character, or did they both kind of materialize? Like, was it more of a, I've always wanted to write something about like you were saying before, about the kind of duo dynamic, or was kind of the puppet idea? Because there is kind of a slight kind of scary horror angle almost to kind of the puppet.
Well, self-willed puppets are kind of scary, and in fact, my wife was saying she didn't particularly want the little Mr. Fitz mannequin that's been made by the masterful puppet maker Sarah Viggers. She didn't really want that at home, and particularly when I actually took it off. I took him off his little stand and left him in poses around the house. It's absolutely beautiful puppet. But yeah, there is something creepy and scary about a self-willed puppet, and particularly one that is a sorcerer as well, and a fairly, I guess, single-minded one. But actually they came together. I had the very first story, Sir Hereward and Mister Fitz Go to War Again, begins with the pair of them riding battle lizards in this, in a fantasy world, heading towards a town where they hope to find employment. They just came out of nowhere. Except, of course, nothing ever does come out of nowhere. But the two of them, certainly, I wrote the beginning of that story, introducing the two of them. That just came out of, I would say nowhere, but of course it came out of a lifetime of reading.
Yes.
And also of puppet making as well, because my mother is a paper maker and puppet maker, so I guess a childhood of much papier mâché helped inform that. And I suppose I'm always thinking with stories too. I guess I was thinking I want to write one of these sort of fantasy duo stories, but I want it to be different. How do I make it different? One of the characters is a puppet. That's a pretty good start.
Yeah.
So I guess in publishing, though I don't usually think about these things beforehand, but I do think about them afterwards. In publishing, the sweet spot for a book is the same but different. Something that resonates with what you've read before, but is enough different so it's just not the same. So you're getting something new from it is something everyone likes, that all readers like, and certainly publishers and booksellers do. I never think about that sort of stuff beforehand because I think it's pointless. In the same way I don't think about what's the market doing now. I think by the time you think about it, the market's changed.
Yes.
So don't bother. The best thing to do is just always write what you want, and what you really want. The story you want to tell is always the best one to do, I think. But in retrospect, I think I was doing what I tend to do, which is to write something that I like, or in the realm of what I like, and just try and make it a bit different. So it's something new for me as well. So got all the good stuff with a few tweaks as well. Yeah.
I thought it was as well. It was quite interesting. Obviously, we've spoken about Sabriel and the Abortion series, and saying about I suppose, the ideas of kind of sacrifice and what you kind of have to give up. And there's definitely that feel of not being able to like necessarily just lead a normal life. That you have a greater purpose. Is that something that kind of transcends all of your books?
Yeah, it does. It does. It does seem to. I blame Tolkien personally, and I'm only half joking about that. I think reading The Lord of the Rings very young, and to me, you know, one of the main themes of The Lord of the Rings, which is not always perceived and doesn't always come out necessarily, you know, in the films, for example. I mean, it's there, but it's not, I think, sort of the main theme, is that of sacrifice, and that people doing what needs to be done to save everybody else often don't get the benefit of what they've had to do. So Frodo, for example, you know, doesn't get to enjoy life in the Shire afterwards. So I think, yeah, that's certainly an influence, and it does seem to pervade many of my stories. But I can't explain it any better than that. I mean, I think all authors, there are themes you return to again and again. Hopefully not in a sort of, oh my God, he's gone back to that again. But in a way where you're trying to work out something, and you do it in different ways and in different stories, and there's degrees of it as well, of course. And but yeah, it does seem to be. I mean, there's probably someone you know, running a PhD on all my books somewhere who will come and tell me that, you know, all my main themes. But yeah, I think certainly that is something that I do tend to come back to, and I guess I believe it's a true thing, and I do try and make everything I write feel real, no matter how fantastical it is, because those are the books that I love the most, the ones that feel real, and you read them and you are totally with that story, with those people in that world, and even when you've read it and you put it down, it's still real. It just was somewhere else. It's not this world, but it still feels like that. Yeah.
So what's next for you? Are there more
Well, there's bound to be another Sir Hereward and Mister Fitz story. The next book I have coming out is actually a children's kind of horror story. I didn't particularly think it was horror, but my editors all instantly oh, this is horror. So that's out in October. Actually, in the UK, it'll be from Bonnier.
Yes.
Called "We Do Not Welcome a 10-Year-Old Overlord." So it's got humour as well.
Yeah.
But it's a children's book, what the Americans would call middle grade, so for sort of 9 plus, and it's about a group of children who find something in a lake, and one of them, the younger sister, the 10-year-old, communes with it and gets powers from it. And her older brother and his D&D playing friends are deeply suspicious of what's going on and want to stop it. But should they? And it's set in 1975 when I was 12 and I was playing D&D. And of course, in 1975, D&D was a complete unknown. I didn't. In fact, I found it in a store. The original white box with the 3 little booklets, and I convinced some friends of mine at school to play. I don't think we met anyone else who even had any idea what a role-playing game was for about 3 or 4 years. No one had heard of it. No one played it. It was completely. I mean, it wasn't even weird. It was just unknown.
Yeah.
So I took some of that experience to put into that book. So that's next. But after that, and with Galance, next year there's going to be a big science fiction adventure. And after that, I don't think I've actually announced this as yet. This will be an exclusive.
Okay.
So after the science fiction book, can't tell you the title yet, That's too much of a reveal.
Okay.
But what I'll do is I'll just sort of nod and wink what I might be doing after that, coming back to something. Nod and a wink. So that's the year after next. So that's the next few years all sorted out. Yeah.
Very. Oh, this is what I love to hear. That there's just more stuff going.
There's more stuff. Yeah. Well, I always hope there'll be more stuff. I would probably write anyway if no one read it, but it's much better if people do. So I appreciate all of you buying my books. Please buy more so I can keep doing it.
And to finish our interview today, so we always like to ask what authors are currently reading themselves, what they're watching or binge watching, and if you game, what are you playing?
I've just finished watching The Brothers Sun on Netflix, which I liked a lot.
Okay.
I thought that was very good. I very belatedly also very belatedly caught up with Oppenheimer,
yes,
which I loved and watched twice in a week. So that's what I've been watching. Reading wise, I've been reading a lot of old stuff actually. And in fact, I've just been reading. I was reading two things on the way over. One is quite old, which is a murder mystery set in London called Death in the City by J.R.L. Anderson from the 60s or early 70s, which I've read before. I'm a big rereader. I'm not even sure why I wanted to read it again, except that it's set in London. It's about a body found in the Thames, weighed down with gold coins. Two things that interest me: the Thames and gold coins, not the dead bodies necessarily. So it was good to reread that, and also for the plane trip, I also read Tokyo Vice, which is also a Netflix series. But I didn't realise that it was based upon a true story. I mean, I think it probably said based on a true story, which I didn't believe. But then I saw the book in the airport bookstore, and I thought, I quite like that series. And this is the non-fiction, biographical account of this American who decided to be a Japanese crime reporter in Tokyo in the early 90s. So that was quite interesting too. So those are the things. Neither of them fantasy or science fiction, but I read lots of fantasy and science fiction too. But it sort of comes in, it ebbs and flows.
Yes, yeah. Do you find as well, like I know a few authors I've spoken to, and my partner who's an author, he can't read similar to what he's writing. So it'll be like, he's working on a debut horror at the moment, so he's just like, I love horror, but I can't read it for now. Do you find that you have to, or can you just embrace it?
I just embrace it. My theory is that if you are going to write, just read tons and tons of it. So you won't be copying one, you won't be overly influenced by one. Yes. Just quickly read 10 books, read 10 horror novels. And because of course, we all of us owe a debt to everyone we've read and are reading. And if you're reading all the time, you're mixing it up and reading lots of different things, and you're taking little bits and pieces from all of them, you won't be overly influenced by any one thing. No, I'm always quite happy to read fantasy. I'm always trying to catch up with friends' books, with new significant books that I've heard about or that people are loving, and I think I must read that. So I'm always trying to catch up, and I'm always typically a year or 2 years behind all the new books. Yeah, there's a whole. I mean, I've got a lot of fantasy and science fiction, either literally on my bedside table or on my various devices to read, and hopefully I'll get a little bit of downtime in this trip, and I'll do some reading, which is one of the great things of train trip, aeroplane.
Yes, definitely.
Just read.
Perfect, brilliant.
And gaming wise, halfway through Baldur's Gate,
of course,
like everybody, but I've actually left. I haven't been back to it for quite some time. But that's a great game. That's, you know,
yeah,
I've been super impressed with that. And some of the old favourites I come back to. Rimworld, I love. It's a great game. I quite often I've always been very interested in games, and I actually often buy games and play them for like an hour and then never play them again. But I still think it's worthwhile because I'm interested in what they're doing or what they're trying to achieve. So there's been a few of those recently where I thought, well, that looks interesting, and I've started to play it, and then I thought, yeah, this is not what I thought it was, or it's not what it's supposed to be. It hasn't achieved what it set out to do. But I'm ever hopeful.
Yeah.
So.
I will have to recommend, because I've just started Unicorn Overlord, which is a new JRPG that's with Atlas, who did Persona, and Vanillaware, and it's just a wonderful kind of strategy RPG, and I love those kind of games where you're just like,
yeah, I do too.
Put this person here.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I think I did see something about it. I mean, scrolling through Steam, looking at all the things, having particularly my younger son, texting me, Dad, can I buy X? It's like, well, do I want to play it? Oh, yes, of course you can.
Yeah, if
I don't want to play it, let me think about it.
Absolutely fair. And there's just so much choice now as well.
There's so much choice. Yeah, and then it's amazing. There's some amazing games that I've just not known about for a long time, and then you discover them and you think this must be brand new, but it's been out for a year. But it's like books or anything. There's so much great stuff out there, but discovering it is the hard part.
Yeah, we just need more time or clones. I don't know. Whatever's easier.
I'm not sure about clones.
Maybe not clones.
Yeah, maybe not clones.
Maybe that's a bit too sad.
Download your experience of playing Baldur's Gate to me. Ooh, it's not quite. Still wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't quite. I still get freaked out by that on Spotify now. There's an AI DJ that will put like your playlist together, and it's just like, but okay.
Yes, well, AI. Yes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's a conversation for another day.
that's a complicated and fraught conversation.
Yes, definitely. But thank you, Garth, for joining us today, and we'll get on with signing all of these books. So you can check out the link attached to the interview to grab a signed copy from our website, or any of our stores will also be receiving signed stock very soon. But we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.